Hi, it's Rob over at Renovation. Just having a look around the garage as we're getting ready to pour the concrete this morning. A few things to point out. I'd just like to discuss briefly all this wire mesh that we've got here and the rebar. There's two things for that. Number one, the wire mesh right now is sitting on the gravel base, but what it actually does is as they pour this concrete, you'll see there's a chalk line there. It's about 5 or 6 inches high. This wire mesh, as they pour the concrete, they actually lift it up midway into the slab, so it'll be about that center line. So that's why they've got that. It's a center line, so the extra rigidity that this wire mesh adds to the concrete is evenly distributed halfway through the slab. Then we have all this rebar here, which is actually spec'd out by the engineer. The reason that's there is because this roof overhead the garage is a flat roof, so it's picking up a lot of snow load in the winter. It takes a lot more weight structurally than a standard slope roof where all the water can run off. So because it's a flat roof, there's a lot more structural load and stresses on this roof. So even though this ledger board that's holding the roof up is actually bolted into this concrete wall, as an additional support, the engineer wanted us to build a 2x4 wall, load-bearing wall, down from the plate onto the concrete slab over here. A slab on its own wouldn't be strong enough to add that extra weight structurally, so he spec'd out all this extra rebar. There's 2 courses, you can see 1 and 2 doweled into the concrete block, and then we have continuous rebar front to back. There's actually 5 rebar. The engineers only called for 4. We've gone 1 extra just to make sure that we've really solidified this whole thing. So by the time this concrete's poured, you're going to have about a foot of concrete here as opposed to the 6 inches on the rest of the floor, and that'll give enough rigidity and strength to this end of the slab, which is aiding to hold up the roof. So that now we've talked about the structural aspect and the reinforcement aspect of the concrete. I'd like to talk a little bit about the slope. You'll notice that the top chalk line here is the upper side of the slab at the back of the garage. You'll see that as we go across the front, across to the front, this chalk line actually drops off by about 6 inches, which means that we've got a 6-inch slope from the back of the garage down the concrete to the front where this formwork is here, which is going to be the level front of the garage slab. The reason you need to do this is because you want to make sure that you have a good downward slope from inside the house away from the house when you're pouring a concrete slab in the garage. The reason we do this as opposed to a level basement, the reason you want it in a garage is because if you were to park your car here covered in snow in the winter, for example, you'd find that all that snow would melt in the garage and it would sit and it would pool underneath the car. You'd be trudging through a puddle on the floor all the time. That's not really much fun, and it also isn't good for the concrete to have water sitting there on a regular basis. So we add that 6-inch slope downward towards the front of the house to allow any water that sits here to actually run off and leave the actual garage. Once we're at the front of the garage, once we have this point here, which is the 2x10 formwork, this is the actual front of where the garage will be poured, then whatever driveway they do, be it asphalt or chalk stone or whatever material they use, that from the top of this 2x10 here to the level of the sidewalk, which is ultimately the grade that you can't change because the sidewalk has to stay where it is, that slope is actually currently we've measured as 7.5 inches. So you've got 6 inches from the back to the front here, and you've got 7.5 inches from the house down to the sidewalk. So that'll allow sufficient slope for water again to leave the house, to go out away from the house. You never want water pooling, at the house, at the foundation wall, anywhere where the water could do damage to your structural house. So again, we've covered the structural reinforcement, we've covered the slope. These are the 2 really important things to consider when pouring a garage slab. So I'm glad we were able to cover that before the concrete truck here got here and it made it a little bit too loud to shoot this video. But thanks for watching, and come back next time.